All right, folks, hello and welcome back to online English class. I hope you guys are doing well today. Today we're going to finish up our work on OTN 7 by analyzing Marlowe's developing interpretation of Kurtz in what can be considered the climactic scene of the novel. Okay, obviously this climax has been undermined or reshaped by the anticlimactic digression at the end of part 2, but nonetheless this is the sort of climax of Marlowe's experiences in the Congo. Okay, so yesterday we looked at the Harlequin, the native population, and the manager's interpretations of Kurtz. Kurtz acting in this area of the text as a kind of nexus, who is an embodiment of the inner truth that has been revealed to Marlowe as he has grown closer or immersed himself more deeply into the Congolese environment, a kind of symbol of the world as it is, reality unmitigated by any outside social or civilizing force. Okay, so before we do that, let's quickly remind ourselves of the top of the week announcements. First and foremost, make sure that you are continuing your discussion grade procedure duties on a daily basis. Make sure that that is authentic. Okay, you know the difference between authentic and inauthentic. Enough on that. Okay, second, you need to make sure that you are continuing to complete your OTNs, and when you are done with OTNs 5, 6, and 7, I'll need confirmation that you have done so by Friday at 3 p.m. Okay, so that'll be for a tri-weighted homework grade. That's a triple-weighted homework grade for 5, 6, and 7. Contextualizing all this is your continued work on your quarter 4 essay, which we'll do anytime from May 18th to May 22nd. When we are done with our work on Heart of Darkness and have completed our Unit 6 test, we're going to turn our attention specifically to the construction of your quarter 4 essay. We'll be talking about the focus points for that essay, what I'm looking for in particular, what I'm going to be grading, some points of composition to improve your essay. We'll be looking at sample essays and all of those kinds of things, but we're only going to be doing that after we have completed our work on Heart of Darkness. Okay, so in pursuit of completing our work on Heart of Darkness, let's go ahead and turn our attention back to OTN 7. All right, so yesterday in our work, we analyzed the Harlequin, the native population, and the manager's interpretations of Kurtz. Okay, so to give us some context for the meaning of Marlowe's interpretation, let's quickly turn our attention back to the meaning of their responses to Kurtz. Okay, so the Harlequin and the native population, to put it simply, admire Kurtz. They worship Kurtz. They treat him as an expression of the inner truth or the reality of the world that they inhabit. Okay. And that reality, that world, is one that is governed by the fact that the human being does not have an immortal soul, but rather there is no kind of ultimate benevolent source of inherent value to the human life. All right, that would imply that the world was governed by a good God. Okay, the Harlequin, the native population, and Kurtz himself do not believe that good God has instilled human beings with some kind of special image or some kind of inherent value. They do not believe that human beings have self-evident rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that human beings have any kind of value in and of themselves at all, but rather human beings are simply mortal creatures, okay, animals, brutes, who attempt, like all other creatures, to exert their will to power and their will to pleasure however they possibly can. Okay, so in other words, right, unlike, say, the Christian worldview, which says this person, all right, and all people have a responsibility to exert their will to power, right? When I say will to power, it's a Nietzschean term, but basically what I mean by that is their will to achieve control over certain areas of their life. Okay, to build systems that they view as good, or to build societies, to build families, to control their environment, to establish dominion over the world that they inhabit. Okay, so you can use that biblical language if you think. All right, so typically in the Christian worldview, that will to power, that exertion of dominion, and also that will to pleasure, that desire to experience pleasant kinds of things instead of pain and suffering, right, are done within the context of the law of God. All right, pleasure is not bad and power is not bad, but the way that the individual pursues them, the way that they will themselves into power and pleasure, has to align with the essential, their essential nature that is governed by God and God's law, which helps people, all right, in the Christian worldview, live in accordance with that essence, and therefore helps them to flourish, both physically and also spiritually and intellectually. All right? So without the existence of that governing authority, that external supernatural source that we call God in the Christian tradition, all right, mankind is left to himself. All right? And he has every right to pursue power and pleasure however he sees fit. Okay? The Harlequin and the natives simply respond to Kurtz, affirming that inner truth, that reality, and he happens to be the best at doing it. All right. So instead of worshiping an ultimate God who is benevolent and good and kind, they worship this man, who is an expression of the ultimate. Right. And if the ultimate is not indeed an infinite, powerful, omnipotent, benevolent God, all right, but rather a man who can exert his will to power and his will to pleasure more effectively, more forcefully than anyone else around him, then he indeed is the ultimate in that universe. He indeed requires a certain form of worship, not worship that we would give to, say, an eternal, infinite, benevolent God. You wouldn't kneel down to him and say, thank you for your kindness and grace and love. You would never say that to Kurtz, because Kurtz would never give you kindness, grace, and love. He would only, right, exploit, manipulate, take, steal, raid, threaten. And it is precisely that which inspires their reverence and adoration, both the Harlequin and the native population. Okay. Furthermore, the manager, right? He is an expression of a person who responds to the reality that Kurtz embodies completely by ignoring it. Okay, by completely misunderstanding it. Okay. He is, to put it in his own words, a man without any entrails, which he means, when he says that, he means a man shouldn't have any intestines. But it's meant to be read figuratively as if he is a man that has nothing inside him. He is a heartless man, okay, a soulless man. Now, this is impossible for humanity, right? The human person cannot actually empty themselves of soul. All right, that is a sort of fact of his existence. But that portion of him, that soul, that heart, that portion, the meaning seeker, all right, that portion, that wily portion of the human being who's always seeking for answers to the question of what is good, what is the purpose of my life, what ought I to do, right? That manager, the manager, has suppressed that portion of himself so much that he is incapable of responding to Kurtz on any kind of philosophical, moral, or theological level. He simply relegates Kurtz, okay, and Kurtz's actions to the realm of business, calling his actions unsound business practices. Now, that doesn't mean that business and the trading of goods is like somehow ignoble or bad. It's not. But as human beings, we have an innate sense that the trading of goods, all right, the material aspects of our lives, right, our business practices ought to be connected to larger commitments to the good, larger commitments that offer a kind of cohesion, that business is undertaken in light of certain truths. All right, that is the impulse of the human soul, right? The manager has suppressed that impulse so much so that he is simply incapable of understanding Kurtz in any other way besides in a deeply ignorant and misguided way. All right. So these two responses, right, the native population and Kurtz's simple embrace of Kurtz, you are God, all right, and the manager's complete ignorance of the significance of Kurtz. Okay, so those two sort of polar opposite responses. On the one hand, a total embrace, celebration, and worship of. Okay, he expanded my mind. He taught me everything there is to know. We bow down to him and we worship him. All right, we serve him unequivocally. Right, versus the manager who says, basically, essentially ignores all of the truth that Kurtz embodies. So these two polar opposite responses are contrasted or juxtaposed to Marlowe's more complex reaction, and that complex reaction is dramatized for us in pages 132 through 134. So if you will, turn with me in your novel to pages 132 through 134, and we're going to analyze this scene as it develops closely. All right? So, on page 132, to give you a little bit of context, you should have already read this section of the novel, so you should know what's going on. But to give you a little quick reminder, Kurtz has been brought to the steamship. The next day, they're going to start heading down to safety to get Kurtz back to some kind of health care that will save his life. All right, he obviously needs some antibiotics or something to help his ailing body, and to take him back to Europe for a little leave of absence where he's going to go marry his intended, the woman who is his fiancée, and he is going to experience some of the fruits of his labor in the Congo. He's going to be welcomed as a hero, as the most lucrative and beneficial and effective member of the Congo Company. The Belgian Congo Company. Well, prior to leaving, right, Marlowe, that the night prior to their exit, finds that Kurtz's cabin is empty. He kind of goes to check in on Kurtz, and he finds that Kurtz is gone. All right, and he recognizes first and foremost that that Kurtz, who cannot walk, right, he is so incapacitated by his illness, all right, that he is crawling on all fours back into the Congo. Okay, so first of all, right, this signals something to us about Kurtz's nature in this moment of the narrative, and something that Marlowe is coming to terms with in real time here. Something we already know, but something that Marlowe is coming to terms with, and that is that Kurtz, on one level, is motivated, all right, by this sort of desire for unmitigated power and a desire to live an honest life in light of the truths that he seems to have discovered in the Congo. All right, this requires him to do a couple things that I've already explained to you back in our analysis of the digression on Kurtz, and that is that Kurtz, even as he goes and affirms, all right, his own essential brutishness, his own essential animal nature, the fact that he does not have a distinctly immortal human soul, all right, as he crawls on all fours like an animal back to the Congo, both is something that gives him this unmitigated power, this unmitigated pursuit of his will to power and will to pleasure. Okay, something that he obviously delights in, something that he values highly, something that he's willing to give his life up for, okay, but also simultaneously cost him his belief in his own immortal soul. All right, hence the fact that he's crawling back to his what? Death. All right, he's crawling back toward death, sickness, illness, and eventual death. All right, so he crawls away from safety. He crawls away from the hypocrisy and dishonesty of European civilization with its pretensions. Pretension is another word for like pretending to, right? For its pretensions of morality, and it's untrue. Something he's discovered and now believes is untrue. It's untrue view of man as an inherently valuable creature with an immortal soul. So as he crawls on all four back into the Congo, Marlowe and also the reader is confronted with yet another example of the fact that Kurtz is a man who has embraced the total significance, the unmitigated significance of what it means to live in a world where there is no immortal soul, all right, where there is no sort of inherent human value that has been imputed on or given to the human creature by some creative force. Okay? So, listen, significantly, Marlowe is drawn to follow in Kurtz's footsteps or follow his track, right? And he even thinks, all right, that he might never go back to the steamer. And he imagines himself living alone and unarmed in the woods to an advanced age. He imagines himself living this kind of brutal, animalistic existence. Such silly things, you know. And I remember I confounded the beat of the drum. He listens to this sort of rhythm of the Congo, the rhythm of the nature and the natural world around him, with the beating of my heart, and was pleased at its calm regularity. Okay? So he, like Kurtz, is sort of drawn back into this brutal, carnal existence. And when I say brutal, I don't just mean brutal like, oh, that was a brutal scene where somebody got stabbed, that was really mean, but rather brutal in its original sense, which is a reference or a play on the original word brute, which is to say animal, all right, something other than man, as distinguished from man. So a living creature like a dog or a bear or a deer, but not a man, okay? So he is drawn to this sort of brutal life, an embrace of his own brutishness, a stripping of his pretenses of moral sensibilities and human distinctiveness and individuality and soulfulness, okay? But Marlowe cannot bring himself to embrace this brutal life completely. He's drawn to it. He recognizes that it reflects a kind of inner truth or reality in the world apart from a creator God that imputes significance on a creation, that imputes essence on a creation. I know I'm getting very philosophical and theological here, but please listen carefully, stick with me, all right? Marlowe is drawn to that reality, drawn to that brutal life, but he cannot embrace it fully. So he tries to stop Kurtz. He is alternatively drawn to him and horrified by him. He is drawn to the life of the flesh, the brutal life of the flesh, and also horrified by the brutal life of the flesh. When I put it that way, perhaps it's more relatable to you, as you are simultaneously drawn to a life of moral complete and utter moral freedom, or amoralism, where there is no right and there is no wrong, but also simultaneously horrified by that kind of chaos, okay, which if you fully analyze the implications of amoralism, you would realize that it is chaotic, okay, and will lead to your suffering, okay. So Marlowe can't fully embrace this. And so he cuts off Kurtz, knowing that Kurtz is going to go and rouse his followers to kill all of the men on the steamship. Okay, that he is going to try and stay in the Congo forever. Okay, and Marlowe asks this very significant and well-written question. He asks Kurtz this pregnant question: do you know what you are doing? Do you know the full significance of what you are about to do? The extent to which you are about to abandon all hope in the fact that your life is eternally significant. The fact that you have a soul and that you ought to live in alignment with that essence. You're about to abandon all of that, okay, and embrace a pure, brutal life. Kurtz's response: do you know what you're doing? Kurtz says, perfectly. I know exactly what I am doing. Okay? So this once again characterizes Kurtz as this kind of inverted Christ figure. this incarnation, this perfect incarnation of the law of a chaotic natural world. Not the law of God, not the gospel of grace, not the gospel of reconciliation and redemption, but rather the anti-gospel, the bad news, the horrifying news that your life is of no greater worth than the brute animals. Kurtz seems to perfectly accept that truth and crawl back into the Congo in pursuit of an honest life in accordance with that reality. But, unlike Christ, Kurtz is just a man, and he does not perfectly incarnate this truth. He is incapable of doing so. Just as Marlowe is incapable of following his footsteps into the Congo, even though he has been persuaded that it is true that mankind does not have some kind of essential value, but rather mankind is simply the shared inheritors of a common curse, as articulated back in part 2, that man is not essentially valuable, that there is no moral structure to the universe, and that seeking after it is a meaningless endeavor, and that there is no immortal soul, and there is no soul in general, but rather all of those are creations of the human mind, which is in the end just simply a biological thing called a brain, right? They're just creations of a sophisticated animal who pretends to be more than he is. Despite the fact that Marlowe believes that or has been confronted with that truth, and that Kurtz has too, they cannot live with that truth. There's a part of them, of both of them, that will not allow them to embrace a purely brutal, purely carnal existence. It's too much. And this is evident for us in the final piece of text that I want to look at. All right. When Marlowe attempts to persuade Kurtz to stop crawling back into the Congo, he threatens him, really interestingly, with being forgotten. He says, "You will be lost." What he means by that is lost to history. No one will remember you. All of the people that you knew, your whole life will be rendered meaningless by the fact that all of the power that you accrued, all right, it will be annihilated. It will be forgotten. You will not live on in memory. It will be utterly lost, he says. Marlowe says that this is a flash of inspiration, that in this moment he understands the essence of the human condition more clearly than he's ever understood it up to this point. All right? He believes, and he comes to understand that Kurtz, like all men, have a desire to endure to the end, even beyond the end, to endure for eternity. Okay? So listen carefully, right? What is the significance of this threat? Well, he appeals to Kurtz's desire to be remembered. All right? Now, this is an appeal to a distinctly human portion of Kurtz's being. All right? A portion of Kurtz's being that is not bestial, that no other animal has. No other animal conceives of history and memorialization. They are incapable of considering how they will be remembered beyond their death. That is a thought that is not directly related to an animal's present survival and comfort. Okay? An animal, as a matter of fact, is incapable of meditating on the significance of its death, the significance of its mortality. Rather, an animal simply avoids it. Danger, pain, the possibility of being eaten or killed, but it does not think about what it means to die, what it means to cease to exist, All right, so here, Marlowe appeals to a distinctly human fear in Kurtz, that no one will remember you. All right, and second, Marlowe's threat implies, all right, that Kurtz is incapable of facing the full weight of his mortality. Not just the fact, listen carefully, please, I know this is philosophical, okay, and you're like, oh, no, it's great. Okay, you're a human being, so we philosophize. That's what people do, all right, among other things, all right. It's not all that people do, but it's one thing people do. So listen carefully, all right. Kurtz, when confronted with the full weight of his mortality, not just the fact that his body is going to cease to work and that he's going to die and that he's going to get buried, but rather that his existence, all right, that his existence is going to be annihilated, that his self is no longer going to exist, and the way that we pursue living beyond the grave. All right, one iteration of that instinctual desire, that basic, essential desire for a human being to live beyond the grave, is the fact that we are history writers, that we are memorializers, that when a person dies, we have a funeral for them, right? We remember them, and we say things like, well, they'll live on in our hearts, right? The human creature is designed, okay, with this sort of inborn desire to affirm their own immortality. All right? When Kurtz is confronted with the full weight of his own mortality, the full significance of what it would mean for Kurtz to walk away from belief in his own immortal soul, he cannot do it. He can't live with that. There's a part of himself, and there's a part of Marlowe's self that wants to live on, to endure even to the end and beyond, that wants to be more than a beast, that is capable of imagining eternity, that desires to affirm its own immortality, that is capable, it's the same part of the human being that's capable of desiring a morally coherent life that is in line with transcendent truths. All of these things defy the proposition that man is simply beast. He's clearly not. He's clearly something more. But here is the tragedy. This part of Kurtz and this part of Marlowe, according to Conrad's modern nihilistic worldview, while it undeniably exists as dramatized by Kurtz, this sort of paragon of the bestial, brutal life, this man who was as honest as you could be, but in the final sense, in the final instance, couldn't accept full, utter brutishness. And by the end, is a liar as well. Lacks integrity as well. This part of Kurtz, this part of Marlowe, is, although it exists, destined to remain unfulfilled, destined for disappointment. This pilgrimage, right? The human pilgrimage, this pilgrimage impulse that is in Marlowe is destined to be disappointed because the human being can never satisfactorily understand the idea at the back of his existence, because there is no idea at the back of his existence. He's been created with, not created, that's the wrong word. He exists with a kind of eternity in his heart in a world that is not eternal. And that is a curse. That is the curse of the human condition, according to Conrad's nihilism. Man cannot discover meaning, satisfactory truth at the back of his life, important point, on his own. That's all for today. Have a great day.